The human heart operates as a continuous high-performance engine, cycling without a single pause for an entire lifespan. Positioned in the central compartment of the chest, the mediastinum, it sits perfectly anchored between the two lungs. Stripping away its protective outer layer, the mesodermal pericardium, reveals the dense, highly organized myocardium tissue beneath. In an average adult, this entire structure weighs roughly 300 grams and occupies roughly the volume of a clenched fist. Analyzing the heart as a fluid dynamics machine, governed by a centralized electrical grid, reveals the underlying logic of its operation and the specific points where that logic can break. A single standard cardiac cycle, one complete contraction and relaxation, takes exactly 0.8 seconds. In that fraction of a second, the lower chambers, or ventricles, eject approximately 70 milliliters of blood. This specific measurement is called stroke volume. This equation models the total system output. By multiplying that 70 milliliter stroke volume by an average heart rate of 72 beats per minute, we establish a cardiac output of roughly 5 liters per minute. 5 liters represents nearly the entire blood supply of an adult human body. The heart processes that entire volume every 60 seconds. Maintaining this relentless mathematical output requires a highly specialized, perfectly synchronized dual-chamber architecture. The heart is two distinct pumps operating in series, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. Anatomists have historically mapped these distinct chambers to understand how they divide the workload of the circulatory system. The right hemisphere manages the pulmonary circuit, pushing deoxygenated blood to the lungs. The left hemisphere drives the high-pressure systemic circuit, distributing newly oxygenated blood through the aorta. This workload creates physical asymmetry, making the left ventricle's muscle wall 3 times thicker. This dual-circuit design also creates 2 strict anatomical exceptions. The pulmonary artery is the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood, and the pulmonary vein is the only vein carrying oxygenated blood. The left ventricle's massive size is a direct mechanical adaptation to the pressure required to overcome the vascular resistance of the entire body. Pushing 5 liters of fluid per minute through these circuits requires strict unidirectional flow. Without internal pressure gates, the fluid would pool and reverse course. These gates sit right between the chambers. On the right, the tricuspid valve. On the left, the bicuspid, or mitral valve. When the ventricles contract, their internal pressure instantly exceeds the pressure in the upper atria. This differential forces the valves to slam-slap. The mechanical impact of those gates snapping closed generates a specific acoustic signature, a low-frequency, long-duration sound that we perceive as lub. Clinicians rely on precise acoustic tools like the stethoscope to capture and monitor the timing of these pressure closures externally. Immediately after, the blood exits the ventricles and the secondary gates, the semilunar valves, slam shut to prevent backflow. This creates a higher frequency, shorter acoustic wave, the dub. What we perceive as a heartbeat is not the sound of muscle contracting, but the acoustic exhaust of pressure gates preventing backflow. This plumbing system remains completely dormant without a synchronized electrical trigger to initiate the sequence. The biological pacemaker, the SA node, sits in the right atrium and generates the original electrical spark. The signal propagates down the center through the bundle of His, then hits the Purkinje fibers, distributing voltage outward and triggering a massive coordinated ventricular contraction. Because the body is largely water and electrolytes, this internal electrical cascade transmits outward to the surface of the skin. Early attempts to capture these surface impulses required wiring the human body directly into massive, highly sensitive galvanometers. On a modern diagnostic grid, the P-wave maps the moment the SA node fires. The massive electrical surge traveling through the ventricles registers as a sharp spike known as the QRS complex. Finally, the electrical reset creates a broader bump called the T-wave. This exact waveform sequence is continuously monitored in clinical settings to track system health in real time. The ECG provides an external map of the internal electromechanical coupling, allowing us to pinpoint exactly where the system breaks. Cardiovascular pathologies represent entirely distinct mechanical failures, even though they are often described interchangeably. A myocardial infarction, a heart attack, is strictly a localized supply chain failure. Due to atherosclerosis or thrombosis, a physical blockage forms within the coronary arteries, restricting the flow of fuel to the heart muscle. This blockage starves the myocardium of oxygen, a state known clinically as ischemia. Ischemia triggers sudden, acute chest pain called angina pectoris as the heart tissue begins to suffocate. During a heart attack, the electrical grid is still firing. The pump is attempting to work, but the muscle tissue is dying from a lack of fuel. That localized plumbing issue is entirely different from the systemic shock of cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest is a catastrophic failure of the intrinsic electrical grid. The SA node or the conduction pathways completely short out. Without the voltage trigger, the mechanical pump instantly stops operating and fluid flow ceases entirely. The third failure mode, heart failure, is a slow degradation of capacity. Here, the ventricular walls are weakened or damaged. They contract, but they fail to generate enough pressure to achieve the required 70 milliliter stroke volume. The arteries are clear and the electrical signal is firing, but the system misses the 5-liter output target, slowly starving the rest of the body. Effectively treating these pathologies depends on identifying whether you are fixing a blocked pipe, a crashed electrical grid, or a degraded engine block. The architecture of the human heart functions through the tight integration of fluid, mechanical, and electrical systems. These intricate components operate in synchronized perfection, cycling 60 times a minute every single hour of your life. Only by mastering this asymmetric electromechanical architecture can we hope to intervene when the system ultimately falters.